So anyone's ears that are watching. All right, I'm going to do a few things to prepare for the drawing, and then we'll get started. Shouldn't take too long. All right. So far in this new book, again, I've talked about it a little bit, but this is a Paper Public A5 portfolio. This week I've done slightly smaller than what I normally draw, so it's a little easier to move faster through these portraits. But so far this week I've done Christopher Hitchens. Ethan Hawke is Lee Raybon from the Lowdown, the new FX series. It's a good show. Anthony Bourdain, which I've drawn him a few times, and every time his face is, I always have to double measure everything, and it is accurate to the reference, down to the millimeter. But it's odd, I always have to double check. He's just got a wild face, R.I.P. Nick Frost, which actually uploaded this drawing time-lapse earlier to TikTok, and they removed it for some reason. So I guess, I don't know. I keep getting stuff pulled down over there. I'm not sure why. And then Simon Pegg. And I kind of accidentally did these off kilter because they're both leaning their heads. I don't know, I tend to leave my drawings as like a floating head, so it's just a study of the face, more of like a direct gaze into the eyes. But I don't know, maybe eventually I'll go in and fill these out if nobody wants to do anything with them. Again, these are all eventually for sale. I'll have prints of any of them, the ones that people like. And sometimes I do full busts where the portrait is actually, you know, everything in it. But there's another group of illustrations that I'm working on that I'm not really ready to show yet on this platform or really any other one. And those will be more full-fledged designs, which I'll probably do in the A4, so it's quite a bit bigger. It's the size up from this portfolio. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. Just gonna mark what feels like the center. Okay. I try not to get this too much in the picture because I hate having to draw from an iPad reference, but gotta do what you gotta do. Eventually I will print all of these out, and at that point I'll probably stream horizontally. So you can see my reference as well. But right now, with the lights that I have, they create too much of a glare on the iPad. So I actually have this like little reflection blocker that I set on the screen so I can see portions of their faces. And just before I put the first pencil strokes down, I'm just gonna put the info for the drawing in here. I do this for a few reasons, not just the drawing itself, but I want to document my process, which I've done pretty extensively. You know, I think the last total time lapse that I did of the last complete series was 67 hours. You know, and it's all the different portraits from my A5 portfolio. And for this one, I'm really not trying to stick too much to one series. I'm going to jump around a little bit because eventually I'll probably cut all of these out of the books to sell the one-of-one originals and to create prints from them. But also just so I don't get bored drawing these series. But in terms of adding the information to it, a lot of people jump in these lives and they ask who I'm drawing, or they make dumb jokes about who they think it's funny to say that I'm drawing. So I just pin these up. And then also, you know, I am doing this really just to document my process and find a little community with art folks. Anyone who wants to ask art questions, I'm always happy to answer them, so long as you're nice and polite. Ooh, some city songs. Okay. Just kind of hoping a few people would hop in before I start, just so I'm not drawing solo, but that's all right. I'm gonna put on a playlist in my ears. Also, if anyone's curious what I'm listening to, I'm always happy to talk about music as well. And no one is here, so I'm doing the Jeff Goldblum from Jurassic Park. I'm now talking to myself, by myself, whatever it is that he says in the car. All right. I've given enough time for anyone to come in that's going to, and now I'll actually get started. Well, if anyone is watching, I'm not really looking at the count, but apologies for the noise. Or, no matter what time of day I start doing these, our neighbor starts doing dishes like he's under duress. It's like he does them from across the room and throws them at the sink or something. If I go on at random times, he does that too, which he is a subscriber, so maybe he's getting a notification and pissed or something. But I guess if anyone sticks around, just hang in there with me and he'll stop after a little bit. One of the nice things about drawing Walt Whitman, especially when he was this age, is that he's mostly beard. And he had a really wily beard, so it's kind of just creating directional texture and patterns. I've drawn him once before, a little bit smaller. But honestly, that was when I was still drawing on grids. And so you kind of sketch out your drawing and then have to erase a bunch of stuff in it. Which, if anyone's curious, I think that that's the wrong way to learn how to draw. Drawing on a grid is kind of almost as bad as tracing. You don't really learn anything from it, because you fail to understand the number one thing that makes drawings, especially a photoreal pencil drawing, you fail to learn the one thing that makes them actually impactful, which is perspective. This noise is annoying to me, as probably I'm sure as much as it is to anyone watching. This neighbor in particular that makes this noise all the time is like the number one case for us to leave this building and probably the city. Not just because of the noise, but sort of the type of people. Kind of like generally inconsiderate, which is hard to be around for a long period of time. It's not really the energy that I like to have around. And I say this usually multiple times throughout these drawings, but if anyone has questions about art or techniques, feel free to put them in the chat and I will check up on it in a little bit. If you're learning how to draw, I'm happy to answer questions. So right now what I'm doing, I'm sketching out a rough form from a side-by-side photo comparison. The photo sitting over there. I explained it earlier, but the glare on my iPad screen is a little too much to film. So eventually I'll, after this next bit of travel that I'm about to do, I'll get a printer and have a side-by-side comparison that you can see. But I do these with the Blackwing pencils. It's a little bit more of a broad, rough sketch with these, and then I go in with a Pentel graph gear and make it more photoreal and detailed. But these help to bring it to life a little faster. And there's been a few drawings I've done this week where they are slightly off center. One on accident, and then the last two on purpose. This is an intentional thing because he's looking that way. And rather than have him centered on the page and then looking into the corner there, I wanted to have like a little bit of room over here because it helps deliver that same perspective. I had an art teacher in high school who told me sometimes the most interesting thing on a drawing or a painting is what you don't see, meaning things that are left off. It's our way of talking about leaving off blank space for perspective. It's funny how little I remember from those classes because I was really terrible at art in high school. But I do remember all the little things she told us. Honestly, when I was taking those art classes when I was in high school, I was so focused on my music career because I was already touring at a young age that I never thought I'd really need the classes. It was just kind of an elective that I had to take. Honestly, never imagined that I'd be doing this for a living later on. It's one of those things I think about when I think about, or when I hear about people saying things they wish they had done more of or sooner. I wish I had quit music earlier and just started drawing more. Because I don't need anybody to do this. I can just draw or paint anytime I want. As my dad used to say, there's nobody drinking my drinks or eating my food for band practice. It's like if there were people in here, I've chased all but one off. Au revoir, farewell. Sometimes if you want to watch me draw, you gotta hear me talk, or you're welcome to mute it. So I do these live streams daily. I took a little time off for some traveling, It's been really hard to build back any sort of regular traffic, which I've tried a few different times a day just to see if that would help, but I've been doing 10 a.m. my time, Pacific Standard Time, and it's not really been all I'd hoped it would be. So I'm going to go back to 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time every day for a while. I do have some more travel coming up, but I'm going to do my best to live stream while I'm there because it's going to be a lot of downtime. So if you want to watch drawing or learn about anything, like I said, I'm very happy to answer questions. And you can really just comment on anything. I wouldn't say necessarily in the chat because I don't archive the chats, but I do have a bunch of, like all of my lives except for a couple are archived. So if you have questions about art, you can always drop them in there and I will do my best to respond to them. Or if anyone has questions in the chat, I can always go back and make videos about that to answer them. I open the window for fresh air and more dishes. It's just a constant onslaught of noise where we live. Alright, now that I've got the rough sketch all sketched out there, I'm going to move my drawing reference to get rid of the glare. Hey Nolan, how's it going? Yeah, since you're always in these, or pretty much always here, these I'm gonna shift back to doing at 5 p.m. my time every night. So I might drop the morning streams because they're basically not getting anybody in those, and I'd rather sit in a comfortable chair and draw in the mornings. Maybe I'll stream silently from like a different spot or something, but this is the only somewhat quiet area we have in our apartment, so. But yeah, I think evening streams are probably going to be the way, so try to be daily with them. Personally, I prefer doing the morning streams, but because then I have more time to get things done throughout the day, and gives me more time to run and lift, all those things. But just seems like not a lot of people are on at that time of day. Dang, you got all the supplies. I'd be wrecked if I ate anything like that. I guess not jerky, I like that. I'm one of those people that's like not able to consume sugar really. makes sense. Yeah, I used to, when I drove a lot at night for bands, like when I was playing back in the day, I'd always have like some high-end like bison jerky and stuff like that. Elk if I could get it. But we were always leaving out of Texas, so I'd stop at those places that have like locally smoked meat and stuff. I think you mean Travis is the other guy that was showing up a lot. I haven't heard from him at all. It's Friday night though, and he works for a music venue, so I imagine he's probably doing something. Yeah, I confused him because my brother's name is Travis. So when he first popped up, I thought like, is this my brother talking like he doesn't know me? But yeah, Bruges shows up in the comments sometimes on my other videos. She's still out there somewhere. I think a lot of the time when those videos had quite a few views on them, it was because y'all were chatting and providing like dialogue for me to pick up on. I think aside from the fact that nobody knows who Walt Whitman is anymore, I'm also not talking as much as I once was just because I'm trying to get these done a little faster. I don't mind talking, but I think a lot of the time it chases people out of here. Does anybody know who Walt Whitman is? Oh, bummer. I forgot that you had ducks. I thought that was code for something at first. I was like, what am I? There's like a youthful lingo I don't know. But actual physical ducks is what you're referring to. I'm Walt Whitman, the learned astronomer, the poet, writer. His most famous thing is called Leaves of Grass. I think like most people would probably only know him from the reference in Breaking Bad. But he had some cool stuff. He's an interesting guy. He was like obsessed with I wouldn't say he was obsessed, but he wrote a lot about New York and being there. And there's a cool thing he said about if people wanted to find him later on, they could find him under the paving stones where he lived. Like, kind of meaning that he was like ingrained in the city. I don't typically like poetry or anything along those lines, but Walt Whitman's sort of the universal exception. Yeah, see. Oh, nice. Yeah, I never really had the mind for poetry. I write more sort of creative nonfiction, I guess is the term they use for it. Sort of my recollection of experiences. That's art in any form is subjective, so maybe it is great, you know. You never know with that kind of stuff. I think anything that's like a creative expression in terms of something you create, like something you write, something you draw, paintings, especially when they're not attached to monetization, I think that's really what art is. You know, I kind of feel like sick to my stomach when people have like art galleries and it's like a pile of trash or one shoe or so. It's like that's not art. And I've talked to a lot of people that get pissed when I say that, but it's like, you know, I forget who it was, but there was a famous, for lack of a better term, artist that put a toilet, like a broken toilet, in his gallery show. And then, as the person that was telling me about it put it, all bets were off. And it kind of ruined, I think, what people like hardworking artists, like actual artists. There's another, I forget the artist's name, I can look him up here in a minute, but my brother was really obsessed with him. He's kind of a weird avant garde, like weird, I said weird twice, but sorry, I'm trying to focus and talk. Sort of an oddball New York artist, and he was kind of legendary for being elusive and not really going with the flow with different art shows. And this gallery offered him a wild amount of money to do an installment, like a big installment in their gallery, and he asked them what the parameters were, and they said none. And so he took the entire budget for it and chartered a helicopter and bought thousands of hot dogs, and he told them that the gallery had to do the show outside, and then he flew over where everyone was standing in the empty gallery courtyard and dumped all the hot dogs on them. And that was what he considered art. It was sort of his way of dunking on the people who appreciate art but aren't artists, which is kind of one of the only things along those lines that I could get behind, because I really do think that people that go to art galleries and the art appreciators in air quotes is that they just kind of drive me nuts. Exactly. Yeah, that's how I feel about it. I mean, the amount of time that I put into this and before this when I was doing music professionally, it's endless, you know. I hear that Malcolm Gladwell like 10,000 hours thing, and I've surpassed that in a couple things. With when I was doing animation during my band days, that's another one. 10,000 hours. That was probably accomplished in 2 years. But even then, a lot of that was unpaid. It was to sort of build up my own bands. It wasn't necessarily like a cash grab or art for money, like a commerce situation. It was more of an expression of what I wanted to do while I was out with a band. It was sort of my contribution as a once upon a time filmmaker and animator. But these, it's a good example. Like I don't mind this at all. I'm gonna draw for a little bit longer, but it's pretty much just me and you in here at this point, and I'm still drawing. I really have to remind myself sometimes when I'm doing these streams that it's about the long form process, and I'd be unhappy if I weren't drawing. I do sometimes look at the numbers and feel like, why am I streaming these? But I think it's just a detail in the process. It's not about the stream in general. But going back to the topic of what art is, it's not what I see in a lot of the galleries. Yeah, for me, I'm going to be doing this anyway. Like if I were sitting somewhere a little more comfortable, because I'm at my drawing desk right now with like big lights and stuff, I would be just sitting in a different chair, watching TV in the background, drawing. So it's kind of like two birds with one stone, or more than two. Find a little community, like connect with people, let them see my process of creating all this stuff, and then I'm also not as bored when I'm talking or have like minor distractions. But I think a lot of art in general is created idly. I think the people that sort of market themselves as artists in terms of like how they dress, how they present themselves online, I'd say, is that art, or you just have a studio somehow? I know a handful of those people, and their studios are paid for by their parents. It's kind of a facade. It's the same type of people that post themselves from like a photo from behind of them observing a piece that they're working on. So, something about that is tragically comical to me. When I was doing, I had like a day job when I quit touring with bands, and it was the place where I used to sell these notebooks and these journals. And I'd stand around and draw when people weren't in there, and if people were rude or didn't want to talk, I'd stand there and draw when they were in there. This is literally what I do in my downtime. So it's kind of just breaking off a little bit of downtime while documenting it. And then it kind of provides a different thing because it is handy to have like a video that I can time lapse after making these. Ideally, if any of these portraits ever went to galleries and there was at least a semi-feature, then I would just have a TV screen next to them with a time lapse showing all of the drawings with like a counter of how many hours it was spent on them. When I was drawing in my A4 journal, the big portfolio that fills this whole frame, those, you know, some of those take 4 or 5 days to finish. And so just for the last series of actors' faces that I did, that was, I think, 67 hours of drawing time. That's rounding down for like talking and setup and all that. You know, overall, it was, I think, like more like 75 hours of actually live streaming. And that was just for, I think, 5 drawings, maybe 6. But I think it'd be cool, which probably won't happen in San Francisco because the city's as lost as a lot of people say it is in terms of certain industries. Don't get me wrong, I do like a lot of elements about being here, and it's scenery, when you're looking the right direction, is second to none. But in terms of the art galleries and what me and all the people I used to know and work with and hang out with used to refer to as like the weirdos, they're all gone. It's all like a giant cash grab here, so I probably won't ever do a gallery show here. But in Texas, I've got some correspondence going on with some people there. And eventually what I would like to do is a gallery show with all of these drawings in series. Which probably at this point I have way too many to show in one gallery, but I could cherry pick the whole lot and go from there. But I have a family member who's a professor out here in California in a different city. She was telling me that galleries in California don't really like fine art, like whether it's photos or actual art like this. They want sort of the artist with the mission statement, you know, what they felt when they made it, not what they made. To be honest, there's like very little interest of what people feel when they make something. That's why I was sort of laughing at people posting the photos of them like contemplating their art, you know, with the furrowed brow. I don't really care about any of that. I care about what's on the page. I want to see what they created, not how they looked when they created it. It's half of the reason I don't really show myself on these things. Eventually I will, so I can talk to the camera, but you know, it's more about that. But more often than not, when I go to galleries here in the city or any sort of creative events, like I went to one last Friday, actually, and I couldn't believe that anyone was, and I don't mean this in a mean way, but I mean as honestly as I'm saying it, I really couldn't believe that people were impressed with what was being shown, with the exception of like 3 films, maybe. It was films and reading and stuff like that. I just felt like there was some kind of joke, like someone was going to jump out and start laughing at some point. A lot of people sort of like teary-eyed talking about their process. I don't know. I think half of like the best songs in the world are probably written watching TV, idly playing guitar. A lot of the greatest art is probably made when somebody's hammered and trying to figure out how to do something different. I think very little of it comes from what people think is the artistic process. This is, I think, the second time I've drawn Walt Whitman, and I liked it just as much last time because he's 90% hair. And as much as I usually don't like drawing hair because his is so wily and all over the place, it's actually just like directional texture. So there's not as much to do on this. It's also an older photo, so it's not a hyper definition, really crisp photo. I mean, for the era, it's pretty crazy that the photo is this good, but it's inherently a softer portrait. See, I'm gonna catch up on these. Such an odd concept of being human, that is. It's weird to think about the fact that we're like conscious. It's not just instincts. Yeah, it's weird when you think about it like that. It's I used to be in a band with a guy who was a philosophy major, which like that statement comes with a heavy eye roll. And I've always been more scientific and factual. Like my favorite writers are like Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, Carl Sagan, Douglas Adams. You know, people that are based more like rooted in factual stuff. And he and I used to argue all the time. And one of the other bandmates stopped us one night, and not even really about any of that. We just kind of clashed as personalities. But he would always bring up his philosophy degree. And I think one of the best things that anyone ever said about it was that philosophy is when you're talking about like human existence and consciousness and all that, philosophy is the question why, and science is the question how. And I've always been more of a how person. But it is weird. We are just big, conscious, intelligent apes, semi-intelligent. It's kind of nuts to think about. But really, like, the more you travel, and you see, like, not just the US, but a lot of the world, you start to see that even with massive cultural differences, humans are very similar everywhere you go. We spent like a good deal of time in Italy this year on 2 different trips. And, you know, everyone's kind of doing the same stuff there, watching TV, drinking Cokes, smoking cigarettes, you know, lots of creature comforts. There's definitely some cultural differences that I wish that the US would embrace, but, you know, you still have the same sort of thing. There's the occasional deep thinker. There's people who just want to go to work and go home. But yeah, it's interesting to think about for a while. The trick with drawing anything like that, especially if it's on the table in front of you, like you were saying, or drawing bananas, is to sort of establish your scale. So like how small or large you want to draw it. But good practice is just with a pencil, no color, just focusing on the actual shape. You can kind of sketch them out. But I do think most people can learn to draw accurately with the amount of time, or with the right amount of time. Let's see, what time is it? Oh wow, it's already an hour and a half. I'm probably going to call it pretty soon because I want to have a Friday night a little bit, but like an old person's Friday night. But I'll be back on at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time tomorrow. What I'll do is I'll finish this one tomorrow and start another one like I used to do on the old evening streams. But yeah, that's already in a place where I could probably do about 15 more minutes on it and be pretty happy with it. And then I want to figure out who to draw next. So see, I might stick with authors for a little bit. But I was saying at the beginning of this that I've been jumping around a little bit just to kind of, you know, have a little variety. So that was this morning and yesterday. Simon Pegg, Frost, Anthony Bourdain. It's Ethan Hawke is Lee Raybon, and Christopher Hitchens. So really, in this one so far, technically all these guys are authors as well as everything else. I don't know if Ethan Hawke's written anything, but Kitchen Confidential is a great book by Bourdain. Nick Frost has one of my favorite autobiographies ever, so does Simon Pegg. And then Walt Whitman, the ultimate poet. But yeah, I'll be back on 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time tomorrow. And this will be in the archive, so this is both for Nolan who's watching and anyone else who finds this later. These are all archives, so you can go back and watch the entire thing. If you have any questions about it, you can kind of see how I'm creating stuff. But anyway, thanks for watching. See y'all tomorrow.